Hello, hello. Welcome everyone back to Keys to AWS Optimization. Excited to be back on the air. The second to last week before reInvent. Some exciting things coming, but welcome back. John, Nishant, nice to see you. John, how's your day going?
So far, so good. I mean, it's like kind of dark here in Boston. We've got a storm, sort of lingering overhead, but not quite as extreme as you were talking about, Nishant, over on the West Coast.
Yeah, good
Yeah,
morning,
what's
everyone.
happening?
Yeah, I'm in the Seattle area, and we had a large storm, the bomb cyclone, a couple of days ago, and over 500,000 people are without power at this point. So I'm lucky to have power and happy to be here live.
Wow, I'm thankful. Thank you. I'm just glad. Yeah, it's very selfish. I'm glad you have power. We had it on our Halloween episode where Savannah had a power cut, and I've had a power cut before in one of these sessions, and it is always like a disaster. So fingers crossed you make it through the
Yeah.
whole episode. And hello to everybody in the chat. Remember, through the episode, you can drop us questions, comments, let us know how we're doing, or just say hi and tell us where you're coming from. Cosplayer is in the house. Hopefully, see you at reInvent Cosplayer. Exciting times. And Connor's here, which is great. And Cloud Without Strife, love it. So let's get into today's episode to welcome everyone to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend at AWS. My name is Steph Gooch. I'm a senior optimization architect advocate in the Optics team, helping you with all your FinOps questions and journeys. John?
Yeah, thanks, Steph. I'm John Massey, and I'm a principal optimizations architect, also with the optics team here at AWS.
Awesome. And we have a lovely guest with us today, Nishant, as said in Seattle. Nishant, do you want to do your 1 minute origin story so the folks can know who you are?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm Nishant Gupta. I'm Senior VP Engineering here at Salesforce. I've been at Salesforce for about 10 years now. I've had two major areas of focus. In my prior life, I worked on building out the observability and monitoring platform at Salesforce for monitoring all of Salesforce infrastructure um, and services, both our own data centers and our public cloud infrastructure. And we'll talk a lot about that in this show. And in my current role, I'm focused on managing our Salesforce infrastructure, both on first party, our own data centers, as well as on AWS, managing the budget across the board, and also uh, help planning migrations of our customers as we move customers from our own data centers over to AWS on our platform called Hyperforce.
And when you mentioned we'll be doing kind of prep calls for this, you're talking about migrations. I got really excited because people know who watch this. I was like born in the cloud, so I don't know nothing, but I don't talk about migrations a lot. So it's good to have someone who has been through it. And as you were just saying, reInvent coming up. I'd love to know poll who is going to reInvent. 1 for yes, 2 for no in the chat. Because Nishant, we were just saying you're going to be there, but you're doing it a very weird way. You're only going for 2 days, did we just say?
I'm going there for a limited period of time. This time, I have some unavoidable conflict, but I'm looking forward to the fantastic conference.
Yeah, and you can say hi. If you see us, come say hi. If you see Nishant, come say hi. If you see any of the guests, tell them thanks for coming on Keys. So we've got a mixed bag of people in the chat who are and are not going. Come say hi if you are there, everyone, please. So let's get into. Before we start, I wanted to do 2 little announcements. Number one. If people haven't seen already, I am doing 1 more episode of the free tier stream on this channel and on Twitch training tomorrow, the very last one of the 4-week series. Go onto that link below and you can see how to register for that. A nice way to see some optimization stuff with some new co-hosts. And we'll come back to this maybe a little bit later, but in case you didn't see, Compute Optimizer has released idle recommendations. John, did you see this on Cost Newsbot?
I mean, that was one of the three recent announcements that I got really excited about, and was going to say for those folks that maybe aren't going to reInvent, at least from outside, you could still track all these announcements that we have coming out, and they've already really kind of started to begin. So, idle resource detection within Compute Optimizer, and just last week we had the price reduction on DynamoDB on demand spend, right sizing recommendations for Aurora. So there's like a lot of stuff that's already starting to come out that's getting people really excited.
Yes, and I got to interview like a lot of customers to talk about the idle one, so I'm very proud that it's finally announced. It's exciting. Right then, let's get into some questions. So, John, you used to work with Salesforce as one of your did I imagine that as one of your customers? Yeah.
Yeah. We've had quite a few folks on the optics team that have been closely involved with Salesforce. With you, Nishant, as well as other lines of business kind of within the organization. And I think one really cool part that you had shared kind of going into this too was that white paper, the 80-page white paper that just came out in October that really goes into a lot of the details behind everything with Hyperforce. Maybe just before we jump into things, do you mind giving like a little bit of context on that? We're going to have Richard put the link out there too.
Yeah, Salesforce, is what 25-year-old company at this point. We pioneer a software as a service company and getting our customers into the cloud. But Salesforce on its own was running on its own data centers, and we still are to quite a degree. And a few years ago, we decided to make this journey from our own data centers and run over public cloud. It was a massive transformation. We decided not to do a lift and shift. We wanted to rebuild our platform in a cloud native way, leverage the technologies that are available in the cloud, leverage elasticity, and redid our entire platform. And the link that you guys just saw is basically a story and a journey of what that transformation looked like of running a really large, complex, and Salesforce grows quite a bit by acquisition and amalgamation of a lot of different technologies, and then building a coherent platform on which we can scale, on which we can do more iterative development and have more agility for our customers and for our products and features, and then run it at really, really large scale on public cloud. So it's an exciting read. I would definitely recommend it.
It blew my mind. I mean, I've shared it with so many folks now because it's the blueprint, right? Every single section is laid out in there around details for cost efficiency, migrations, auto scaling, what's the architecture look like, and I haven't seen anyone create a document or an artifact like that before. So I thought that was so cool, and excited to kind of peel back a little bit into some of the details and just like Steph said, wanted to start a little bit with the migration piece that you were talking about, and wanted you to share a little bit of context on, how does Salesforce look at migrations and maybe in particular that transition period of, I'm moving it from one place to another. How do I handle the cost considerations? What does that look like when you're doing that at scale?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Salesforce is not new to migrations. In our own data centers, if you think about, you have a bunch of customers, and our unit of scale is a pod. So if you have a bunch of customers in a pod and their usage grows, and we need to accommodate more and more customers, and at some point you will physically run out of the capacity on a pod. So we have developed technologies where we move customers from one pod to another, or you have an older set of machines on which things are running and you want to do a refresh on those instances, and we call that instance refresh. So we would have to move customers from one place to another, refresh our hardware and do it. But migration to public cloud is a completely different story because we don't have the same apples to apples. And there are a lot of different constraints that come into the picture. The way me and my boss, we talk about it, the way I describe it as, it is the world's largest Tetris game that we are playing, right? If you think about, if you think about a Tetris game, you have different shapes, and then you have containers in which you're trying to minimize the waste. And in some sense, our goal over here is, again, minimize unused capacity, right? So we look at, it's a multi-year plan. We have a lot of investments in our own data centers. We want to obviously use the hardware that we have for their useful life. So we look at, okay, which data centers are going to go end of life first. You don't want to migrate customers on a data center that you just built, right? Because there's a lot of useful life of the hardware in there. But at the same time, if you have a data center that is due for a refresh in 6 months, in 1 year, You may want to target those first because it is better to not refresh that hardware and just migrate your customers over to public cloud. So that's a huge consideration. Then we look at which customers are eligible or not eligible, right? There are legal eligibility requirements. There are eligibility requirements in terms of, do I have the right feature set available or not? You look at how much capacity do these customers need? Not today, but we forecast how much capacity they're going to need 12 months from now, because every time we migrate customers, right now, the customers do have a little bit of a downtime, right? So we want to minimize that. So we don't migrate customers, every month. Right? We try to minimize it. We try not to do it, and we don't do it for just once a year, if that at all. We look at schedulability, right? So if you are a healthcare company, let's say you're Aetna or Humana, and right now it's open enrollment, it's not the best time to move them, right? They are not comfortable us making massive changes. Uh, so we need to sort of think about, what orgs we can schedule when. Have we given them enough notice? And sometimes there are customers who are okay to move over a weekend. Sometimes they're not. Uh, we also have very set windows where we say, look, these are the maintenance windows we can move customers in a month. So we have to think about, what's our migration throughput? How much traffic can we actually move over? How many bits can we move over? Do we have enough bandwidth available? Uh, with public cloud, one of the advantages is that we can be in so many different regions on AWS, and can really address some data residency concerns for the customers, right? So figure out, okay, which customers need to move to which region, so that, especially in Europe, so that we adhere to data residency concerns. Uh, we also want to be mindful of not pack a lot of customers in a region. Uh, right, we have blast radius considerations that we need to think about. We need to think about scale considerations. And then there are constraints that AWS may have. We need a lot of capacity, and cloud is elastic, but it's better to give a lot of forecast and heads up in terms of how much capacity we're going to need and how quickly we can build our artifacts on top of raw AWS capacity. And finally, it boils down to how much budget we have to move the over, right? So, we are paying for our own data centers, and then we migrate customers, and we are paying for the same traffic in public cloud. And it's sort of a dual pay at the same time till we are able to completely shut down a data center. So there are a lot of constraints, and it's a multi-year planning that we go through, and then we just execute, and we've been executing for the last couple of years, and been very successful at it.
So I have a follow-up question here too. Sorry, Steph, didn't mean to jump in there, but I'm curious. You're talking about a lot of variables and like a lot of considerations. Some of these are forecasts that they're educated guesses, right? Because there's a lot of moving parts, and you're managing expectations with customers and internal stakeholders. Do you have any advice for maybe another customer who has to manage expectations between like engineering teams and finance teams on what kind of expectations they should have around like either timelines or cost considerations? How do you build that like kind of effective partnership between these people so that this big process can be smooth and have the right expectations for folks?
Yeah, I think the key is prioritization, and how critical do you see this as a corporate mandate? For Salesforce and at our scale, it's a very, very large program with a lot of visibility, with a significant amount of customer impact. So you need to have buy-in at the highest levels to say, yes, we're going to migrate customers. We need support from engineering to be able to do that. We need support from product side. We need support from the sales side. We need customer success support to help these customers migrate over and answer any challenges. We need to have forecast how much money it's going to take. We need to incorporate that into our budget, not only the current fiscal year, but the long range fiscal plan for the next 5 years, 6 years. We need to understand how we're going to manage those things. And at Salesforce, we leverage a process called V2MOM, and you guys can look it up online. V2MOM stands for vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measures. And that's a prioritization exercise where we run this process on an annual basis to say, okay, what are the key things? What are we going to prioritize as a company? And Mark writes his V2MOM, and his leadership writes their own, and it percolates down all the way to an individual within the organization. And that helps bring that alignment, right? So when you have that broader alignment, say it's a critical program, yes, engineering is all in on it. Yes, we're going to make sure that we have enough resources and budget to support it. Yes, we're going to make sure that we have customer success support around it. Yes, you're going to make sure that sales is aware of it. And, so if we have an entire company rallying around making these change, then it becomes a little bit easier from a prioritization perspective. There's still a hard work of, yes, forecasting, doing the execution, planning for it, and dealing with challenges that come on a day-to-day basis. But at least from a mandate perspective, it is clear.
Mm-hmm. So need everyone aligned. It's not going to work unless we've got everyone aligned together. And I think that a lot of really cool parts from the V2MOM process, and it just also talks to the culture of Salesforce, right? You need cultural aspect there in order for these things to be successful. I guess last question, kind of on the migration front, is was there a key learning or something that you all kind of found out through this as it relates to the cost considerations in particular with the migrations that you all had uncovered throughout the process?
I think our key learning was better and open communication, right? The more heads up we can give to our customers in terms of what we are going to do and why we are doing it, and why moving to public cloud on Hyperforce is advantageous for them, both from availability posture standpoint, security and trust standpoint. I think to be able to just get in touch with the customers and hold their hand through this process. And some of these customers have been long-time customers with massive amount of optimizations and customizations, making sure that everything runs smoothly. And we're still in the process of doing that. So I think, just working well with the customers and give them enough heads up was definitely a key thing. I think from a cost and budget perspective, I would say it's all about planning. It's getting the visibility, having detailed understanding of what it is going to cost, and how to budget for it, and then sticking to it is a key thing. I personally don't like surprises at workplace. So the best surprises we have on this front, and I'm ready to trade off good surprises because I don't want bad surprises. So I think that that planning is a key aspect of it.
Nice. All right, I want to jump in and just say the audience if they are on a similar track with them. So chat, 1 for yes, 2 for no. Who has been part of a migration, just to see if people can align, and hopefully you'll be able to kind of take some learnings from what we've just talked about. And we have got a couple of questions in the chat in which I will go to. But one thing as well, which I just wanted to touch back on, is you said blast radius for kind of siloing out things, which that phrase escaped me the other day. And the only thing I could think of was like splash zone. Like, when you go to SeaWorld and you have to worry about the animals. I forgot the phrase blast radius. So thank you for reminding me that was what the word was supposed to be. Okay, some people have not been part of it. So thank you, chat, and keep the questions coming. So we've got a couple of questions, couple of points I will bring up. Firstly, touching back on to the white paper you mentioned, was an 80-page white paper, definitely going in summarizo-matic. Fair enough. I feel like that's what I use most of my AI tools for these days. But like John said, it is a good read, and you can really pull out some nice things from the white paper. Just a fan for you from Optimus Prime and G in the house. Love that. And then we had 2 questions, so we can kind of touch on these now. And I might give the first one to John to kind of move this one along. What advice would you give to someone in a big organization to move to Graviton? If you wanted to give a small piece of advice, John.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd echo exactly what you had just mentioned, Nishant. Helping to manage expectations by understanding cost considerations. What are you aiming to save? What is your end goal here that you're trying to actually get to? And then who are the stakeholders that you're aligning back over to as well? It's really tough to kind of look at a big organization and say, hey, want to just do this one thing. If you don't have the alignment, you don't have considerations around when folks are going to be able to actually implement changes. Those things make it tricky. So get specific and figure out what you're ultimately trying to achieve. Find a stakeholder that you can align back over with, and then make sure all the folks that are going to have to be a part of this are focused on the same goal. So pick a good starting point, get folks involved, get folks excited, and keep it iterative so that you can track the progress and measure your successes as you go.
Yeah,
Yeah, and sorry, Nishant, you go.
I think the key thing is to understand what you're gaining and what you're giving up. So anytime, Graviton is a great example. I'm super excited about Graviton. We are actually in the process of moving some of our workloads over to Graviton because it gives us better price performance ratio. And I think the key thing is doing that performance testing, right? So run the test, understand what your performance metrics are. Are those acceptable to you or not post move? And then plan in terms of how much you're going to save. And then once you do this, then go full in on it. And not all workloads are same. So test every workload independently, and you will be able to get much more in certain workloads versus the others. So, but yeah, John's advice is get the alignment, and then I would say start small, do the testing, and then go from there.
Yeah, and I'm going to shout out the intelligence dashboard for Graviton that Rose and our team is working on. As has some new updates. If you have not checked this out, go and do that, and this will help you bring in that logic of how do you actually choose what workloads to focus on, and where can you start to agree your goals in migration processes. And then the last one, where did the question go? Was I'm going to throw this one up there just to say, but did you migrate Outpost as well? I don't think you guys did, so we won't be able to answer that one specifically. But if you want to know more about Outpost and want to have any more questions that we don't answer in today's episode, always feel free to email us at costoptimization@amazon.com, and that personally goes to me, and I can help you with any of your cost questions. So that was a great summary, I think, of migration advice and how to focus that. And just another plug, remember that Sigurd Richard is listening to all of our conversations, so stick around to the end to hear his full summary. But the next thing we were going to talk about, was kind of scale and optimization focus. And Salesforce is obviously massive, and you have loads of complicated, complex workflows on a tight button, and there's not like an easy way in which you can optimize. So how do you start with maybe budgeting out your spend for cloud? Is there any advice you would give to someone who in a large organization is like, where do I start?
I think start with having visibility in terms of what your spend was last year. That's where we start. What's our current run rate? How do we see that run rate growing historically based upon the growth of the company, the growth of the traffic? We use transactions as a proxy to understand some of those metrics, but there are a few other metrics that we look at. And then look at any big major investments that you're doing. Right? For us, continued migration is a big investment, which is not organic growth. This is completely non-organic. We're moving large chunks of our infrastructure over to AWS. Then there are other things that we are doing. We're investing a lot on data cloud. We are investing massively on Agentforce, and understand what your key drivers are. And then have a model to figure out how much tentatively it's going to cost. From there, it boils down to having accountability, right? So if you're given a budget, are you able to stick to that budget? And we drive accountability by dividing up that budget at senior leadership positions who are running independent services or product suites to say, this is what your budget is, and this is what you need to stick to. Now, it's not just once said and done. The challenge over here is that in order for them to manage budget, you need to have massive amount of tooling. The key thing is visibility. Are you tagging your resources properly? Are you able to map the spend that you have to your organization structure, to various products, to various teams? Are you able to slice and dice this data in terms of how much money I'm spending on a particular type of AWS service, how much money am I spending in one region versus the other, how much money am I spending on a particular product, how much money am I spending down to in AWS parlance, a two pizza team, right? How much is a one team spending and their services historically as well. Uh, so once you have that level of visibility, you can drive down accountability. Uh, you try to understand where there are gaps. We have alerting in terms of, look, if there's an anomalous usage, let's say one standard deviation to your mean of your usage, then we try to alert the teams in terms of, you may want to look into it, right? Maybe there is the growth spend, maybe it is okay, maybe it is not. We do forecasting based upon your usage at various levels, and I think AWS provides some of the tools as well. But at our scale, we just ingest raw GER files, the cost and usage reporting, and build a lot of that tooling in-house, especially because we want to merge it with our own org structure, which is very key to drive that accountability. So that are the key things. There are a bunch of other tools that we use uh, that AWS provides, that we develop in-house to make sure that we are able to sort of stay on budget. And then there is an aspect of, do you have the agility? Can you foresee if you're going over, and if you see that, look, you're over in Q1 and that then is going to continue and you're going to be over in Q2 and Q3, how can you now steer the ship, right? How can you bring that visibility to senior leadership so that we can take some corrective actions as needed? So those are sort of some of the ways. I'm happy to dive in.
One thing I was going to recommend, kind of as you were walking through that, Nishant, was the FinOps X talk that Salesforce had done, talking about some of the tooling and building out, the agile data models to dive in and kind of be able to make sense of all this stuff out there that's really important for understanding those usage trends. So for folks who are kind of watching us right now, definitely check that out. Watch through. It's one of the great sessions from FinOps X this year. I'm curious too, as you're talking through, managing expectations around like this thing at scale, was there anything that you all had to kind of learn or educate folks on, as far as, understanding that, hey, these costs are going to be a little bit variable, and maybe we're bringing workloads into AWS. We want you to understand that, this is a different model of doing things. There's benefits to doing this, but it's going to look maybe a little bit different than what you might be familiar with. Maybe in the first party data center world.
Yes, I think a lot of things are different. The cost structures are very different. It's very dynamic. It's not static. In first party, we are doing forecast 5-6 years out in terms of understanding what our usage is going to be, and how much more server we need to buy, because you can't get instant capacity. It's not like you want capacity tomorrow and you can go into your AWS console and spin up more instances. You need to plan for it. It's going to take time. It's going to land. You're going to rack and stack those servers. You're going to bring them online. So it's a 6-8 month lead time, which means that I'm also buying capacity, which I don't need right now because I know what that's just going to be. Now things have completely changed. I don't want to buy more capacity than I need in 8 months from now. I am going to buy only capacity that I need tomorrow or the next month or the next week. So there are a lot of changes like that. The key thing is, how do you measure the efficiency? And to me, it is less about how much it is costing and how much money we are spending. It is about, are you spending that money efficiently? So we have metrics around unit cost, right? What we think the unit cost is right now. Is it stabilizing? Is it going down? We have metrics around things that are inefficient that can be optimized. And maybe we have a dashboard and a tool, and saying it as a dashboard is sort of maybe not doing it justice because it's fairly complex. It's called COIN, Cost Optimization Index Dashboard. think of that as more of a credit score, right? So every team or every service gets a score based upon how well they are utilizing the resources that they are reserving. And we also tell them what are the ways in which you can optimize. So for example, if you're using S3, are you using S3 intelligent tiering or not? Uh,
Mm.
what are the potential ways in which you can save money? If you're using EBS, are you on GP2 or have you migrated to GP3? If you are on M5 instance, we need to know why, because M6 and M7 provide much better price performance aspects. So we want people to migrate, and we quantify that in dollar amount to say, like, this is the amount of money you can potentially save by making these changes, right? How much, do you have any unattached EBS volumes? And then if so, why? What are we doing to fix it, right? So we run a lot of these campaigns and we normalize that onto a score, and we review these scores on a monthly, quarterly basis. We do a budget review on a monthly basis. And the goal is for each service to sort of keep their score in green, so to say, on a scale of 0 to 100. And if you're not, then we give you tools and visibility as to how you can actually improve those scores. So, which is very different from 1P, because once you buy a server, whether you use it or not use it, you're still paying for it, right? So the optimization levels are very different.
So how do you go about? Oh, sorry.
Do you mind if I ask? I was going to say,
Yeah.
someone had a direct question about the S3 one, so I was just going to
please do. Yeah.
So following on from what you were saying about identifying people who are using like intelligent tiering or whatnot, how do you quantify as your intelligent tiering savings? Do you look at object patterns, or do you kind of, maybe a bigger question as well, are you estimating savings based on kind of numbers? And then also, are you tracking the optimizations they do afterwards to see the impact?
Yeah, so we are estimating savings and we track it before and after. And then yes, the access patterns are absolutely important, right? So if you have a data warehouse, take observability, is the work that I very closely did for many years. For a lot of the observability data, there is recency bias in the data, right? 98, 99% of your queries are going to be for the last 24 hours, for the last 1 week. There are going to be some small subset of queries which is going to query data for the last 1 year. But for various reasons, you need to store that data, right? So you can use intelligent tiering to now save the data and not have everything in terms of hot storage. But if you are using S3 in some other ways where the latency is important, then intelligent tiering may not be the right option over there, right? So it depends upon use cases. We try to sort of estimate that. We understand what the access patterns are, and then we try to sort of estimate those savings.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you're hitting on as well is, and probably what Cool Guy Trav is also saying, is that not every bucket can fall under, yes, using intelligent tiering. But the good thing about your setup is you have these monthly reviews and you have this scorecard and you have the dialogue. And that's probably the best thing you want to advise everybody, is that having those conversations and a mechanism to have them in a reoccurring basis allows people to have that. So rather than someone being the FinOps person with the cost budget being like, you're doing a bad job, it's become, hey, we've noticed this, and then people are like, oh no, this is the requirements, and you're like, okay, fine, and you can
exactly. And then you have an exception process to say, like, hey, okay, this service can't leverage it, so it's an exception. The same thing, we providing visibility into what your P95 and average compute utilization looks like, and if it is low, then there's a way to auto scale things and keep that high.
And you guys have a case study with this as well. You're publishing all the great content. So I'm loving that. And Cosplayer said, Kerr library needs some additional insights. I will let Justin know that we need some more of these queries. And I had 2 more questions that I just wanted to put. Thank you, audience, for jumping in with these questions. I'm loving it. Curiously, you may or may not do it, but do you use focus schema for a single pane of glass, your unit economics for multi-cloud? Have you dove into focus, or are you still kind of focusing? You mentioned cost and use report.
Yes, we are not using focus, and we ingest the raw CUR files, and then we try to just based upon the tagging, and we have very extensive tagging, and I would say that's probably the number 1 thing that you need to do if you want visibility. But we are able to then aggregate these things at service level, at a team level, organization level, and a business unit level.
Perfect. Last one. So we were talking a little bit earlier about migrating to Graviton, but this person is serverless architecture a cost optimization consideration for any of your workloads that you have envisioned? Yeah, would love to know if you're considering that step further than VMs and moving on to serverless with your migrations.
Yeah, so a lot of our stuff is running on Kubernetes. So we're sort of over the VMs, but there are potentially some workloads that can leverage Lambda and serverless architecture. But the key for us is that when you're running really large scale uh, for an extended period of time, right? Our scale is only continuing to grow. It's not sort of going to dip. Then I think the way I think about this is, can I leverage the capacity that we have reserved for multiple different types of workloads in peak and non-peak hours, right? So sort of do a little bit of a management of that capacity ourselves internally, so that I can smoothen out my usage based upon the various usage patterns of different services, right? So we may decide to run some batch services later on during an off-peak hour, but leverage the same capacity. So now I have a homogeneous usage of the capacity that I have, and which ends up becoming a little bit more cost-effective than moving over to serverless architecture. So it depends upon your scale, and I think there's no one size fits all. I think serverless architecture is great for a lot of scenarios. But when you have very consistent day in, day out workloads that you're just running and running and running, and you're not going to stop running those things, then I think over a long period of time, you may want to think differently about this.
Nishant, I'm curious about that too, because we've mentioned a couple times now around doing some of this modeling and looking at some of the data to kind of figure out what the best best approach is. When it comes to optimizing some of these workloads, and they're going to have either seasonality or they've got specific workload considerations, I'm just curious, who do you think should be doing that? Should that be the developers themselves? Do you think that should be more of a central team that should be helping to kind of do some of that illustrative modeling? Just kind of curious in your thoughts.
Yeah, great question. Great question. I think it's a combination. For us, there are certain things which are definitely very central. Take savings plan as an example. Right? So we run savings plans centrally for all of Salesforce, and that allows us to run our compute workloads in a fairly cost-effective manner. If you have to run savings plan distributedly, then it's going to be, people will end up optimizing for the local maxima as opposed to the global maxima, right? So you want to pool all your resources and figure out, okay, what your overall usage for compute is and how to run savings plan and how much to buy versus not. Then there's an aspect of, okay, I know my workload better than any central team would do, right? And then at the scale at which we are, we certainly can't know every single workload to the depth that we can actually provide a great visibility or a recommendation around it. Our approach is to build a centralized platform, right? So we do, at Salesforce level, we do sort of broad stroke forecasting in terms of what do we need in a region. What are the new services that are going live over there and how the overall growth is. But if it goes down to an individual service, we provide them with the same forecasting platform. And some of those models are internally developed. Some of these we partner with Salesforce Research. And we provide that internal capacity forecasting platform, capacity reservation platform. So you can model things out, whether you're in a new service, you can sort of model things out to say, okay, this is what my spend is going to look like. This is how much more capacity we're going to need. And it is important for us centrally as well, because we get these various signals in terms of what is needed, what the spend is going to look like, that we can aggregate and have a more higher fidelity view. So it's a little bit of a platform approach, so that the assumptions and the way we think about modeling this is centralized, but then every team is responsible for their own thing.
That's really cool. And I think one of the cool parts that I heard there too is that some of those central optimizations might change based on the scale that you're operating at. And maybe as you start to grow, you'll be able to centralize, more compute optimization because you've got a big shared platform for stuff. But that might not be the right thing to centralize. If you're operating at a smaller scale, you might want to just ask yourself those questions. What can be a centralized optimization effort for you at that scale now? And then look into the future. What does that look like maybe a couple of years down the road, so you can plan ahead, maybe anticipate some of those things, and have a plan in place.
Yeah, and domain specificity is a critical aspect as well, right? You can't expect every team to be an expert on feature development, the work that they do on security, on building a reliable distributed system and optimization of the cost and plan for the capacity, right? So you're asking teams to do too much at this point. So the more you centralize some of these aspects and provide them with the right tooling, with the right visibility, with the right platform to be able to accomplish these things, right? Then you get a much more efficient engineering organization.
And I would be curious as to know, there's a lot going on with strategic business and kind of central, non-central work, and there's obviously a lot of emphasis on optimizing and budgets. But how do you kind of balance the innovation versus kind of keeping track of costs? What's the balancing act you kind of have to deal with at scale for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's not just cost. I mean, if you think about, there is innovation, the product development work, there is work and balance that you need to have with uh, availability and keeping your services highly available, and those are sometimes at odds with, from a cost perspective. So for example, I'll give a very small example, as we run all our services across 3 AZs in a given region. Running services across 3 AZs can cost more, uh, but it's a conscious choice to make services more available for our customers as part of trust. Investments in security is critical as well. So we ask a lot for our teams to do. And again, I go back to our process of V2MOM, where we where we determine what the priorities are and also set some targets, right? So can every service optimize, 10% compared to where they were last year? Absolutely. Can they do 20? Potentially, yes, as well. The question is, are you going to push them towards 20 this year, or are you going to say, like, you're going to only do 10% because there are other things that you need to do, right? So my view is, as long as we are able to stay within the budget envelope in which we are operating, right, then I want you to focus and do the optimizations to that degree, because you need to spend time focusing on other things as well, right? So it's a balancing act. Some teams are further ahead, some teams are slower, some teams are ground up innovation, very nascent. Some teams are very mature. You ask more from mature teams as opposed to on the nascent teams, right? So it depends. But we leverage V2MOM to sort of understand the priorities and lay it out for them.
I think that's also a great perspective to say, hey, we're bringing these optimization goals to the table. We're going to look at those directly alongside all of our other goals and use that to calibrate, what the levels are, what our thresholds are, what's the timing look like. Just a really great perspective. Yeah. So my next question, kind of along with that, then, is how do you go about like structuring the incentives then? So we talked about the coin score. Folks have the visibility into where they are today. They've got some goal around where they want to get to. What are your thoughts on leaders who are maybe thinking about how do they structure some incentives to do that?
Yeah, like from an incentive perspective, I would say our number one priority is trust, which is providing a secure and always available platform for our customers. So nothing trumps trust. From that point on, point score is a great way. It sort of provide accountability. But I think from a cost and budget standpoint, the accountability is more at the leadership level as opposed to an individual team's level. You don't want to push the accountability and the budget down too granular, because then you're going to have silos of inefficiencies, right? So at a fairly senior level, I think a leader should be able to understand where they want to invest more, which teams they can push more, where there is more waste, and we provide that visibility where we can be more efficient. So I think at that leadership level, as long as we are sort of in line with our budget, we are okay. Uh, Now, for a given leader, we provide them tools like we have Hyperforce Cost Explorer, right, which is built similar to the AWS Cost Explorer, but they have visibility into which teams are spending more versus less, which teams are optimizing their resources more versus less. So just putting that onto their V2MOM as a priority to focus on. And as long as they're meeting the overall goals, that is where the focus is. The leaders are accountable for their score as well and for their budget. So you can call it a hall of fame or a wall of shame, but I think that stays at the leader level. But at the lower levels, we let the leaders decide how they want to drive it. But we provide the appropriate tooling for them to have
Yeah,
visibility.
give them the information. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, there's always the ongoing debate of the carrot or the stick or the Hall of Shame, Hall of Fame. Elements with it. So I was going to ask about how your relationship with AWS has developed, because you guys, as we've dropped a bunch of links throughout kind of case studies and things you've been developing, how have you utilized AWS? Any advice people who are maybe like midway on AWS and want to kind of utilize their us more? What any advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I think I've used AWS both as a Salesforce exec responsible for managing our relationship and working closely with them, and also as indie developer myself. So it depends on where you are on that spectrum. But for somebody who's running at a fairly large scale, I think that the relationship has been absolutely fantastic. We work very closely with AWS. There are multiple touch points, not only with just my team, but individual, high workload teams who are focused, running large databases or doing a lot of work on the EMR side, or doing, massive optimizations on Kubernetes and what's coming. So we try to get a good insight in terms of what's on the roadmap so that we can align our engineering investments based upon that. We try to understand what's on the roadmap from uh, the new instances that are potentially going to be coming at what point in time, and so that we can count on those optimizations as we are thinking about sort of our engineering plans. Graviton is a great example, right? Understanding what the roadmap of Graviton rollout is going to look like is helpful, because then I can bake that into the engineering plan for the teams to migrate from one to the other. So having that visibility much further ahead helps. Uh, Getting technical help, doing the well architected stuff, understanding, doing a review of how we are architected, what is the best way to leverage some of the other things. So, John, some of the work that you do, and then people like yourself across the board, that has been very useful. And having sort of monthly reviews to understand what are some of the challenges, what we can do better. And on the other side, we work closely with AWS and provide a good amount of details in terms of how well we are doing, what is our forecast, what our forecasted need is, so that you can plan for capacity on your side globally. So it's been a very fruitful relationship, and it's
Amazing.
a high touch point, ongoing relationship.
Yeah, brilliant. Great advice there. And Cosplayer just shouting up for leave. Great session. Got to go. More like this, please. So you've gotten some great feedback from the audience, and thank you, everyone. And as a reminder, you're talking about well-architected labs, a well-architected kind of review. Last week, Natalia was on talking about that. So if you haven't already liked and subscribed on this channel, that's one thing. But make sure you go over to our YouTube channel, Key Service Optimization, like and subscribe there to stay up to date with all of the content. I'm going to fit in one very short question before we go to Sigurd Richard for his summary of the episode. But Nishant, I've got to ask, Gen AI, how is it coming into play when it comes to your cost awareness or optimization?
Yeah, it's an exciting time. I think everybody got to do something with the Gen AI. There are two broad ways in which we are leveraging Gen AI right now, and then there are much more that are sort of in the works that we are playing around with. One is on the forecasting piece. So we collaborated with Salesforce Research. We have LLM-based time series forecasting model called Morai that we are leveraging for more higher fidelity forecast. And again, the more accurate our forecasts are, the better we can do from a budget and cost planning, but also the better we can do in terms of providing early read into AWS from what we need from a capacity standpoint, especially for key resources like GPU, which are far and few in between right now. The other area where we are leveraging Gen AI is around providing visibility, where there's so much data and you can slice this data in so many ways uh, that it is hard to build a comprehensive dashboard or a set of dashboards that fits every need. Uh, but having an agent that you can talk to about how much money did I spend last month? What are the regions where I spent more money versus less? What are the ways in which I can optimize? So having an agent that every individual within the organization, from exec down to an engineer, can talk and ask questions around cost, around capacity, around what is our status on the migrations, is sort of another very key area where we're using Gen AI right now. But again, you can do a lot of different things in terms of understanding, where there are anomalies, where there are drifts, what the recommendations are going to be. So there's more that we are planning to do this coming year.
Perfect. It's all infiltrating as well. I've got to get my Gen AI mention in here. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you so much, Nishant. John, anything else before we do the summary for Secret Richard?
No, just want to say thank you, Nishant. And like you mentioned with the partnership side, I think the really cool part about this has been, having opportunities like this where we're able to get, our most innovative customers to share their experiences with the broader community and really be able to kind of take things to the next level by helping folks learn from everything that you all are doing. So yeah, I just want to say thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And if any other large scale customers want to come on cost optimization at amazon.com, let me know. always looking for episodes. Okay, let's bring on the Secret Richard summary. Someone did ask, does Secret Richard actually exist, or is he Gen AI? He is real, but he is actually a real person. So our summary today: migration is just the beginning of Tetris. Yes, I love that imagery. That's very helpful for me to explain to people. Visibility is key to scaling. See no inefficiencies, optimize no inefficiencies. And finally, ideally, leadership is accountable for budgeting. Yes, kind of love that mindset. Thank you, Richard. And thank you, everyone, for watching. We are not doing an episode next week because it is Thanksgiving, and then it's reInvent. So you'll see us back here in 2 weeks or just 3 weeks. But hopefully, if you see us at reInvent, come say hi. If not, we will be sharing recordings from some updates of a reInvent summary the week after. So just make sure that you subscribe and you'll see all of our updates. And thank you all, and we'll see you next time. Bye.